Okay, so there's a very specific reason as to why I'm making this video. When I saw this tweet pop up on my timeline, I had to take a little bit of a step back, think about it for a second, and realize to myself that, hey, this actually is not a new idea. This is something that had sort of been alluded to before, but never really was discussed with this much detail. Today we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens and one of their favorite teams in the NHL to do transactions with, the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek because for Marc Bergevin, when he was here before Kent Hughes, there was a series of battling offer sheets and the two teams didn't like each other, and you could definitely see that Carolina had a little bit of a bone to pick with the Canadiens and what they were doing with the Sebastian Aho offer sheet from a few years ago. But when we go back to the most recent offer sheet involving both of these teams, the Jesperi Kotkaniemi offer sheet of last year, by the way, it's been a year since that happened. Kind of wild, isn't it? There are a few other details that I think bring themselves up in the forefront nowadays that make this conversation a lot more interesting. So, without further ado, let's introduce the topic into the spotlight once again for those who are unaware. Jesperi Kotkaniemi was supposed to be an absolute game changer for the Montreal Canadiens. He's 22 years old and he was drafted back in 2018, third overall by the club. Yeah, that's a pretty high draft slot. He probably shouldn't have gone third overall, all things considered. You remember who else was available in the draft at that time. You had Philip Zadina, you had Quinn Hughes, Boquist, Evan Bouchard, a whole bunch of other guys that probably would have been a lot more valuable, Brady Tkachuk as well. But Kotkaniemi went third because the Canadiens and Bergevin needed a center. Lo and behold, Kotkaniemi did not live up to the expectations. Sure, he was good in Finland and he was good in the AHL, but when it came to his NHL play, he never really broke out in the way that a lot of Canadiens fans thought he should have early on in his career. He had 34 points in 79 games played as an 18-year-old, very nice, had 8 points in 36 games the next season, and then had 20 points in 56 games after that. He scored some pretty clutch goals in the playoffs, which gave him the high favor amongst a lot of Canadiens fans, but when it comes to the expectations versus reality of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, in the sample he had in Montreal, he never lived up to the expectations, even though he was a relatively young guy who had some growth and developing to do. This is why, in the summer of last season, you had yourselves Kotkaniemi entering a lengthy contract extension conversation with the Canadiens. You had a lot of rumors going out there saying that the Canadiens wanted to go a little bit cheaper, and Kotkaniemi thought he would be a little bit better, and yada yada yada. It was not an easy negotiation process, which is why the Carolina Hurricanes came in here and they swooped Kotkaniemi off the floor by signing him to an offer sheet which would see him make $6 million for one season. The Canadiens did not match. Kotkaniemi went to the Hurricanes and then he signed an extension worth $4.8 million a season till the end of 2030, when the guy's going to be 29, turning 30 years old. Now, Kotkaniemi in the last season's worth of play had 29 points in 66 games played, and there is some debate as to whether or not his progression into the long-term future is going to be worth the contract amount on the dollar. But we had ourselves a tweet made talking about what Pierre LeBrun said earlier on this week's segment of Insider Trading about what the Montreal Canadiens were talking about with Carolina before the offer sheet went down. Per Pierre LeBrun, Marc Bergevin wanted Seth Jarvis in exchange for Kotkaniemi before the offer sheet. This is a very simple tweet, but when I saw it, I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, no, that actually kind of makes a lot more sense, because I had to look this up again, but I did have this memory trigger in my mind that sort of said that the Canadiens and the Hurricanes, they kind of discussed a Kotkaniemi trade before the offer sheet was made. Lo and behold, after searching up a few tweets, we did find these from Pierre LeBrun. The Hurricanes did try to trade for Kotkaniemi instead over the past several days, but nothing came close to making the Habs interested, so Denton gets his offer sheet revenge. Anyways, enjoy the fun, everyone. This was a year ago, in August of 2021. Then you had what Elliot Friedman said on the 31 Thoughts podcast, 31 Thoughts because Seattle wasn't in the league yet. The Canes have been looking for a center. They talked to the Canadiens about a trade, and Carolina let them know about the possibility of an offer sheet within the past 24 hours. Montreal and Kotkaniemi were not close. Friedman's guess is that they talked about 2 times $2.5 million a season, maybe less, so, of course, I mean, That's a $5 million contract over the span of 2 years right there. Kotkaniemi signed an offer sheet with Carolina that gave him $6 million in 1 year. Carolina knows what a potential long-term deal would look like for Kotkaniemi, less than $6.1 million discussed with KK. There's a legit chance that Montreal is considering not matching. Yeah, they didn't match it, so that's exactly what happened. It might just be the initial reaction. Friedman also said that he thinks that Montreal will shop the first and third around the league to see what they can get with them before deciding, and yeah, Christian Dvorak was the ultimate outcome there. But either way, going back to the initial idea that started this video off over here, Marc Bergevin wanted Seth Jarvis in a Jesperi Kotkaniemi trade before the offer sheet was given out. And when it comes to that idea, I could totally see why Marc Bergevin is shooting for the moon and a little bit more here, because Seth Jarvis is just an absolutely phenomenal hockey player. Let's go over his profile and what the Canadiens would have seen in this type of guy. Seth Jarvis is 20 years old, 5'10", 174, is a right-handed center right-wing player. Drafted by the Hurricanes in the 13th overall spot in the 2020 NHL Draft. Now, Jarvis is a guy that honestly could have gone a little bit higher, depending on who you asked. He was ranked 12th by Elite Prospects, 11th by Future Considerations. Craig Button had him at 13. Bob McKenzie had him at 18. ISS had him at 29. There were a lot of varying reports on Jarvis, but the main bread and butter about his game and the reason he went so high in the first place was because in 2020, the guy had 98 points in 58 games played for the Portland Winterhawks. He was an absolute stud, a very slippery, dynamic, offensively skilled player that got better as the year went on. He started off the season pretty okay, but grew and absolutely started to take over shifts as the season progressed. His ability to work in tight spaces seems as good a place as any. Jarvis is one of the best attackers in the draft with a defender on his back. He seeks out pressure with gear changes or stops and starts, and then he creatively pulls away with an arsenal of moves. As a gifted passer and shooter, he's the type of player who wants the puck on his stick. And when it came to the potential, the ceiling of a guy like Seth Jarvis, he absolutely had a sky-high ceiling because his offensive IQ, his puck skills, his shot, it was all fantastic. He was so slippery. That's the best way you could describe the way Jarvis was able to traverse around the WHL. Just maneuvering through guys, forcing his way to the front of the net, and scoring a boatload more points as the season progressed. Eventually, he had 27 points in 24 games played in 2020-2021 with Portland and was over a point per game in the AHL. And this recent season in 21-22, as a rookie for the Hurricanes, he had 40 points in 68 games played. He also turned 20 in February, so he was 19 for the majority of that year. Let's do 40 divided by 68, multiplied out by 82, and Seth Jarvis was on pace for 48 points as a 19-year-old, and he had 8 points in 14 games played for the Hurricanes in the playoffs. So he was an absolute stud. Definitely a guy with a lot more potential heading into the long-term future, I feel, offensively, than a guy like Kotkaniemi. So for Bergevin, I mean, it makes a lot of sense why he would have reached for this guy in particular, especially with the Canadiens already liking small, slippery guys. Just imagine a pairing of Seth Jarvis with, I don't know, a guy like Cole Caulfield maybe? A guy like Suzuki? Have an all right-handed line right there? Suzuki, Caulfield, and Jarvis? I mean, they're not the biggest trio in the world, but they definitely can produce offense. And for a guy like Kotkaniemi, I definitely do think that if there is a value-to-value comparison, Jarvis would be seen as a lot more valuable nowadays. He's younger, he produced more points than KK, he's on an entry-level contract as opposed to Kotkaniemi's long-term $34.8 million AAV contract. I will say, though, if Kotkaniemi goes out there and becomes what he is supposed to be able to become, let's say a first-line caliber center with very good passing, I don't know, something in the mold of an Alexander Barkov with some good two-way capabilities as well, then sure, $4.8 million seems like a steal, but the way Kotkaniemi has progressed as of late, it's not really giving too many people optimism towards him being a guy like Barkov, like some people thought he would be after his rookie season in the NHL in 2018-19. Either way, though, talk to the comments your thoughts about Marc Bergevin wanting Seth Jarvis, of all people, in some sort of a Kotkaniemi trade before the offer sheet was made, and how ambitious do you think the guy really was? Because if he's going out there and saying, okay, Don Waddell, you want Kotkaniemi? Well, give me Jarvis. What do you think that does to the value of a guy like KK in trade conversations? It kind of boosts it up, right? Because I think everybody kind of knows how good Seth Jarvis was, and after the rookie season he had, everybody should be very familiar with that now. So Kotkaniemi being included in the same breath as a Seth Jarvis, I think it's pretty ambitious. But then again, I mean, third overall draft pedigree, right? who knows how much that holds in the court of value. But either way, talk to the comments on your thoughts about this Canadiens trade idea that was thrown around there. Was it fair? Unfair? Would you have thrown another name in instead? But I hope you enjoyed this video. Trolls99, and bye.